I'm trying to find a lap chart, Tom, for the last 5 laps of the race, because it looked like some kid had got a whole load of crayons and just scribbled all over them. Basically, everything's going along smoothly, and then suddenly they suddenly jump 20 places on the grid.
You won't find one,
in the
Damon.
race.
Everyone will have ripped up any lap chart that was anywhere near them, I think.
Did you notice Vettel? There was at one point, Stroll got ahead of Vettel, and then Vettel got back within the space of a corner. That was when he collided with Stroll. And I was actually look at the timing thing on the left-hand side, and Vettel goes ahead of Stroll, and then he goes back behind Stroll, and within a space of sort of 1 second. It was a lot of interesting stuff going on, wasn't it?
Well, that in a nutshell sums up the 2021 Russian Grand Prix, doesn't it?
And they told us it was going to be boring.
Not a bit of it.
Russia doesn't produce good races, they said. Yes. My goodness. They obviously haven't been introduced to Formula One in 2021.
But you brought your Spa rain with you, didn't you?
Yeah, by the way, Damon kept blaming me for the rain, you know. He's like, I'm not coming to a race with you again for a while. You just keep bringing the rain. I was like, charming.
But isn't it funny how all of what we might traditionally call the boring races have been really good this year? Barcelona decided right at the end. Paul Ricard decided right at the end. And of course, Sochi decided. I mean, that is, as you say, Pinks.
But you know, Sochi was fascinating before we even got to the end. I mean, quali was exceptional. Going into the race, you knew there were so many cars out of position. It was set up brilliantly to entertain. But who could have predicted those final 3 laps? Utter madness. So painful to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah, agony.
Triumph and disaster. The 2 imposters. They struck again.
And on that note...
Welcome to the F1 Nation podcast with Tom Clarkson, Damon Hill and Natalie Pinkham.
And you can see just how slippy it is for both Norris and for Hamilton. Norris hasn't got as much experience in this sort of situation. Hamilton has. Now what's going to win out? And it's now just 4 seconds between Norris and Hamilton.
Verstappen could finish P2 here.
And Hamilton takes the lead of the race as Lando Norris slides off the track. Hamilton is going to get 100. He came into this race as a gladiator. He finds the checkered flag as a centurion. Lewis Hamilton, it's 100 race victories. He wins the Russian Grand Prix and he retakes the championship lead.
Get in there, Lewis. That's it, mate. That's the 100. Yeah, well reacted at the end there, Lewis. Beautiful drive, mate.
Great effort, guys. That was hard work, man.
So who had the best weekend, do we think? Was it Lewis getting his 100th win? Was it Lando Norris proving that he really is the real deal? Or was it Max Verstappen who came away with not only another new engine in his pool, but with second place?
I don't think Lando's going to leave there saying that was his best weekend. I think he's going to think
Pole
absolute
position,
agony.
dominated the race.
Oh, come on.
I think he's left a marker, hasn't he? I mean, if you go back to when Lewis nearly won in China and he stayed out and ended up in the gravel because he hadn't got any tread left on his rear tyre.
2007.
That was going to be his first win, wasn't it?
No, that was going to be his first championship, wasn't it? He'd already won in Montreal, do you remember?
Oh, I see, yes. No, that was going to be his first. That was right. So he basically, a similar situation, same team, and they blamed Lewis for staying out too long. Well, actually, the team really should have given him more guidance because his experience was low then. And then on the other foot, you have, well, in a completely similar situation, you've got Lando Norris going for his first win in very similar conditions and overriding the instructions from the engineer who said, come in, shut up. That's it, he said.
Lando, what do you think about it, Inter? What do you think about it in Inter?
No!
If only he'll be thinking that, won't he? He'll be going, damn.
Damon, let's not forget, Lewis Hamilton overrided his engineers as well. And it's only because Mercedes had pitted Bottas first of everybody for intermediates and they'd seen the times he'd done that they then overruled him. But Lewis's first instinct was to stay out.
There's a flurry of guys that came in about lap 49 or something around there, wasn't there? There was a whole bunch of them came in at one go, and Max was one of them. So they all had one lap on Lewis and Lando. Lewis didn't want to come in. He was reluctant to come in because he could see what Lando was doing. And that's such a difficult thing if you're leading a race to decide, I'm going to surrender the lead of this race because I think that it's going to be too wet for slicks in a lap. Or you can't, I mean, ask yourself, do you think you'd like to press on and hope it's going to, not going to rain hard? I mean, who really knew it was going to rain harder and harder? Mercedes will say they did. Lando is basically saying that McLaren didn't know that they knew it was going to rain that much harder. So he gambled, and sadly it went the wrong way.
There have been precedents, both good and bad here, haven't they? And I'm inviting the listeners to try and remember an instance where a driver staying out won him the race. And there's one that springs to mind very evidently for me, and that is Hockenheim 2000. Rubens Barrichello's first win in a Ferrari. Ross Brawn on the pit wall. The master strategist calls him in. Rubens ignores him, says, I'm all right on slicks out here. The rain is coming down. We've got 5 laps to go. And Rubens, by staying out, won the race. So it does work that way, and that is what Lando was hoping was going to happen.
Well remembered, Tom. That's pretty impressive. I was going to say Donington, because Senna won that race in changeable conditions. They were ridiculously changeable conditions. Nobody could predict whether it was going to be too wet or too dry. And more often than not, he stayed out on the slick tyres when it was time to change to wets, and everyone else bottled it, me and Prost included.
Damon, that's Donington 93, of course, the European Grand Prix. How many pit stops did you make in that race?
About 12, I think. I don't know. I can't remember. It was ridiculous. It was a world record. I think it still stands as a world record for pit stops in any race. We were going in and out, in and out. There was no information in those days as to what the weather was doing. You look up at the clouds and go, it's raining.
Well, to be honest, I think that was probably a better bet on Sunday as well.
Some people had a better view of what was coming from the sea, didn't they? Probably the cameraman in that crane, poor bloke. There was a shot, wasn't there, towards the end of the race where you could see this stuff coming. But when is it going to arrive? Is it going to arrive in 3 laps, 2 laps, 1 lap? Nobody knew that.
And it was Spa-esque, wasn't it? Because for, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, only half the lap was wet and the rest of it was dry. So while they were skidding around through turns 5, 6, 7, Lando was then able to get some heat back in the tyres at the back end of the lap. And I think that sort of sent him, he had this sort of false sense of security. I can make this work because only half the lap is wet, like we so often saw at Spa, but it just got worse. And do you know what? I hope they're not, when they have their debrief this week at McLaren and they say, what else could we have done? Well, in fact, Nat, didn't Andreas Seidel say to you, didn't he talk about some WhatsApp group for hindsight or something? And, hindsight is 2020, isn't it? And I think it is what it is on the day. It could easily have gone the other way and it didn't. You got to roll the dice sometime. Absolutely.
And I think you do have to be philosophical about these things. And I'm hoping that Lando's been able to get some sleep last night, and as the week progresses, as we edge nearer to Turkey, he is able to take the positives, of which there were plenty, as you say, from this weekend. I mean, he had an exceptional weekend. It was just that frustration at the end. I thought he looked really pale at the end. It was almost like he was in shock when he was in the pen. There was a sort of lovely interaction between them where Lewis was trying to offer him some crumbs of comfort, but that's easy to do when you've just won your 100th Grand Prix. Yeah, it was just an interesting juxtaposition, wasn't it, between the man going for his 100th and the man going for his first, the agony and the ecstasy in those few moments, and that fickle mistress that is the weather.
But Natalie, the day before, it was completely the other way around. It was Lewis had egg all over his face because they didn't come in and put slicks on soon enough, and Lando had put the slicks on soon enough, as had George and Carlos. And so that's the margins you're dealing with at that level. And sometimes it is just so fine, and the consequences are so huge that you can look like you're a genius if you make one decision or the other, and the other alternative, you look like an absolute plonker.
And actually, that goes to show that with 100 Grand Prix wins under your belt, sometimes it is just a roll of the dice. It is just luck. Some will say, well, Lando will know for next time, but will we get a next time? With that level of detail, lap 50, lap 51. I mean, it was excruciating to watch, I have to say, but I do hope that he will be able to put this down to experience, learn from it in whatever capacity he can. I'm not sure.
The guy of the weekend, the star of the weekend, was Lando Norris. He didn't win the race. He got pole position, but he drove absolutely magnificently under quite a lot of pressure from a world champion, 7 times world champion behind him, and also with Carlos as well. And, he had a lot to deal with. And I loved it when they came on the radio and said, how much pace have you got in these tyres? He said, well, what do you want? I can give you whatever you like. He was very cool on the radio. I know he got a bit shirty at the end.
Until the end.
but that's because he didn't want to be talked to and he's trying to concentrate on driving the slicks in the wet. But you can understand that. But I think he was a star. He missed out in Monza. Daniel stole the show there. And I think that Lando probably felt slightly aggrieved that, he'd done so well all season that it wasn't him to win the race. And there he was leading in Russia and sadly didn't quite get to the line. But he's made his mark, hasn't he? I mean, he really has shown what he's capable of.
Absolutely.
There was quite a telling remark by Lewis Hamilton after the race. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but he said, Lando is doing a great job of leading McLaren. I thought that was quite telling. Bit dismissive of Daniel, perhaps, but leading McLaren. And it's extraordinary how I think Lando has come on in leaps and bounds this year. And McLaren must be very relieved that they signed their long-term deal with him just before Monaco, because I think he'd be a load more expensive now than he was only 3-4 months ago.
Absolutely. And if you were to say to him at the beginning of the season, you're going to not just be driving alongside Daniel Ricciardo, but out qualifying him. And by the way, you're going to get a pole position, handful of podiums, and be chasing a win in a McLaren. I mean, he would have leapt at that opportunity, wouldn't he? It's just in the heat of the moment, though. It's just all too much to properly process.
And Pinks, when he was leading Lewis Hamilton in the dry on Sunday, I never doubted him. He just is so confident and so mistake-free that I thought he can deal with the pressure of having Lewis breathing down his neck. And you don't say that about every driver. Certainly not. Right, I'm going solo on the live reads this week, and I'm going to start by talking about Sun's live bacteria. Now, I'm not going to start talking about what happened to me in Baku. Regular listeners will be aware that it wasn't a smooth weekend for me, but what I can tell you is that since I've started taking Sun's live bacteria supplement, my life has improved no end. Because did you know 1 in 4 guys suffer from gut health issues like irritable bowel syndrome, abdominal pain, and bloating? We might not want to talk about it much, particularly me referring to Baku, but it's clearly very common, and so we should pay more attention to the impact it can have on our lives. Because, folks, gut health is vital to your general health and wellness because it helps fight viruses and other illnesses. And I'm not going to mention any names, but there have been Formula One drivers this year on the grid who have been unable to perform at their best because they've been suffering with health and wellness. Now, Sun's live bacteria supplement is clinically proven to treat digestive troubles and improve your gut health. It's backed by over 50 clinical trials, making it one of the most studied bacteria in the world, and was effective in helping 8 out of 10 men with their gut issues in one study. So check it out at suns.co.uk and use the code F1Nation25 to get £25 off your first order. That's F1Nation25 to get £25 off your first order of Sun's live bacteria supplement.
It's taken us a long time to get that 100, but so grateful for all of you, for all the work back in the factory and here. Thanks so much for not giving up on me.
Well done, Lewis. Great job, man.
100 not out. I mean, that is such an impressive tally, isn't it? 100 Grand Prix wins. Most drivers just dream of seeing the checkered flag 100 times, but to win 100 times, it's astonishing. And I can't see it being matched anytime soon. What do you think, Damon?
Well, it's phenomenal. I mean, just mind-blowing, really. I can remember going up to Lewis when he beat my 22 Grand Prix victories in the paddock. He was walking across, and I said, "Oh, Lewis, well done. You just passed me in the Grand Prix winning state." And he said, "Oh, have I? Really?" It was like a very minor milestone that he's passed there, but that was a long while back.
A friend said to me earlier, what is the difference between win number 99 and win number 100? Because when you've won that many, it's just another one, isn't it? But you've only got to look at how emotional Lewis was after the race to realise that it was hugely significant, and it had been weighing on his mind for quite a long time. I mean, Silverstone was the last time he won.
Yes, well, he stalled, didn't he? You know, we all had it teed up, or he's going to win it eventually. And of course, there was a long delay. It didn't quite happen, all these occasions. Of course, Monza crashes and other mishaps. And so, you know, get to the point where you think, is this ever going to happen? And also, when you've got things like crashing into the pit wall, throwing it, everyone starts going, is he starting to... Is this the beginning of the downward trajectory? Well, not a bit of it. I mean,
not only crashing into the pit wall, but Damon, the previous day, do you remember he'd slightly misjudged coming into his pit box, and you didn't want to be the front jackman at that particular moment, did you?
Well, this is the thing. We've witnessed him making some uncharacteristic, unforced errors, and you know, with all the confidence in the world, there's part of you that's going to start questioning yourself, and you can see all these young guns just coming through the ranks, hungry, ambitious drivers who are 10, 15 years younger than you. You're thinking, goodness me, it's now or never. I've got to get this done. And yes, I agree that the emotion was massive this weekend. And you realize that it's because it's not easy. And, you know, he's been challenged in a way that he hasn't before. And every year that goes past, those challenges become slightly nuanced, slightly different. And therefore to win is a huge achievement.
They knew they had to win though, didn't they? They knew they had to win this one. With Max at the back, they were under pressure in some ways. The only thing they could do was win the race.
Yeah, but it didn't look like that on Saturday, did it? I mean, you really thought...
No, it looked
they
shaky.
They really stuffed it in quali. And you thought, God, this was an open goal for them. Such a massive opportunity to capitalise on Red Bull's woes. And you thought they've gone and blown it. And then to come back and finish first and fifth was actually incredible.
Well, Pinks, actually, for half of the race, I was still thinking what you've just described. Lewis, he dropped back to 7th, I think, at the start.
Yeah.
And then was
Valtteri
just
down in
sort of
14th.
Stuck. It was a blocking masterclass by Daniel Ricciardo early on in the race. Just there was nothing that Lewis could do to get by him, so he was biding his time. And I was thinking, okay, obviously we weren't predicting the rain. I was thinking, Lewis, you're going to have to start making a move at some point. When's it going to come?
At one point, Max was only about 5 seconds behind him. And you know, you're starting to think, oh, Lewis is in the wars here. You know, he's blocked in. He can't go anywhere. But he has learned incredible patience as a driver, and he knows that he just has to bide out the first stint, and then he puts his hammer time to the metal, and off he goes. And there was a point where I just thought, blimey, if they pit now, you know, Max is going to be coming out just, you know, 5 seconds behind him. But that's 5 seconds suddenly turned. Once Lewis got clear air, that 5 seconds suddenly turned into 20 seconds, and you know, he was back on track.
Do you know what? I think you're spot on about the patience point, because and that first stint, you're thinking that this is miles off. And yet when you reach the checkered flag, who even remembers what happened in the first stint? It was a completely different story, the race, from the beginning to the very end. And that's why it was so compelling. But it's all that mattered is where you were when that checkered flag fell. And Hamilton was just brilliant. I mean, not everything else went out the window. Quali, the mistakes on Saturday, all these issues that he had and the niggles from Monza were just forgotten.
We had the return of Toto on the radio. Come on, Lewis, you can do this. That's a very bad impression of Toto Wolff. That's what he sounds like to me.
Well, I actually think he sounded quite surprised in that moment. We can actually win this, Lewis.
But Nat, why do you think he suddenly feels the need to get involved? Does that make any difference to Lewis? Come on, Lewis, we can win it?
Well, you all need to be G'd up now and again, don't we? And actually, maybe it's just an involuntary reaction over team radio. I think I would do it. You wouldn't be able to shut me up. It's like, shut up.
I think it's something else. I think Nat is, you know, Lewis is such a heart on sleeve guy. You know, and I took a picture of him walking back after the crashing into the wall, and I guarantee you, you know, he went back to the debrief room and sat there and was glum and embarrassed and all those things. And he has to kind of pick himself up, and maybe the team help him do that. But not saying he needs it, but I'm saying he's someone who feeds who picks up on positive energy and encouragement and stuff. And I think Mercedes
Yes,
give
I
him
agree.
that.
I
And
agree.
the cool information they give him, with Chauvelin and co, and on the radio, and Bonington, just they give him support, and he believes in them, and he delivers for them. So when they say we need some of your special laps, he goes, okay, I can do that. And he is a phenomenon. That's a word that is bandied about, but 100 Grand Prix, you don't do that by, we've talked about luck. He's had some luck, he's had some bad luck, but the average is that he's a cut above nearly everybody. And, you can't put it in the context of history going back over, generations, because maybe Jim Clark was that good, I don't know. But different times, and their longevity is better these days, thankfully, because it's safer. But, my God, 100 Grand Prix victories.
On the topic of longevity, I remember you telling me years ago, Damon, that what really stood out about Michael Schumacher was the fact that he could do it year after year after year. And not everyone can do that. Other people could turn a lap as fast as Michael Schumacher. Of course they could, but they couldn't do it year after year. And Lewis is another, isn't he?
It's the standard that they perform at, and the consistency and the ability they have to keep delivering that over years. It is the remarkable thing. But I think what Lewis has done is he's created space for himself where he can get away from Formula One. Because if it's all about Formula One, you can get burned out. And he doesn't look burned out. To me, he looks like he's fresh as a daisy. But there were times when Michael was in tears, with the pressure. And any of you who've seen the Michael Schumacher documentary recently, he does reveal the pressures that he was under and the responsibility he felt. And it is draining, but you need to have a balance in your life. And Lewis has fought hard to give himself, and Mercedes and Toto have given him that space. They haven't overworked him. They haven't used up all his free time. He goes and recharges his batteries, comes back, and he's ready to go again.
He even made that point after the race, actually. Someone said to him, what did you do during the summer break? It seems like you've come back stronger. And he said, well, I didn't think about Formula One. Didn't say what he did do, but he didn't think about Formula One.
And how useful is that as a driver, Damon? Just to entirely switch off?
I think it's really crucial. In fact, one of my best performances, I think, was Spa in '98. And it's no coincidence it happened just after the summer holidays, after the summer break. And I'd been out splashing around in Spain on a wave runner and, having fun, just came back refreshed. And my driving was much better for some reason. I jumped in the car and it was like I was enjoying doing what I was doing. And I think that's really important. You've got to enjoy it. You've got to look forward to it. And maybe removing yourself from it, sometimes it increases your desire to get back in and do it again.
And also not overthink it, because I definitely think some drivers can be guilty of that. Max Verstappen, I think, is one that just does seem to take it in his stride. I mean, I thought he had an unbelievable weekend where he was kind of like his story was almost lost as a subplot with everything else that was going on, but he came from the back to second.
Pinks, he said after the race, he said, if I hadn't had the engine penalty and it had just been a normal weekend, I would have been really pleased with second. So to have done it from the back and got another power unit in the pool, it's like all his Christmases came at once, didn't they?
I mean, it was an interesting situation where you had both title contenders bouncing out of Sochi with renewed vigor and excitement about this championship. It's a rare thing, isn't it, when both of them leave happy?
I mean, anybody who says, a lot of people do this, say, it's just the car, isn't it? Well, let's have a look at where Perez and Valtteri Bottas finished, shall we? Because Max Verstappen started behind all of them and still came second. It just proves the point, doesn't it, that these guys are exceptional. It must be quite demoralising when you go back and look at the fact that you started ahead of them on the grid and then suddenly they're on the podium. Admittedly, there was the fudge factor at the end with the rain, but you still have to have your wits about you and make the right decision. And they did that.
Well, absolutely. It was those who responded and reacted best under that immense pressure of the weather changing. I do think that Lando was under another level of pressure from everyone else. As you say, to forgo your lead is the hardest decision to make. For the others, it feels a bit sketchy out here. Let's go in for Inters. It's just a different decision for Lando to make. But yeah, in that moment, Verstappen pitted at exactly the right time and went from 7th to 2nd in just one lap. Amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. Did you catch up with Christian Horner after the race?
Yeah.
What was it? I imagine one of the happiest men in the pit lane.
Yeah, I mean, he said he was treating it like a win. I mean, as far as they were concerned, this was an incredible result because they went into both Monza and Sochi, both Mercedes strongholds, assuming these are going to be our worst performing tracks. And we're about to go into a run of arguably tracks that are more suited to Red Bull. So look, they're in a good place right now.
You can understand why in ancient times people believed there were kind of gods that favoured certain sides in battle, because I mean he's definitely been charmed these last few races. I know there was a very controversial thing in Monza, but the net result was one race went past and he was supposed to lose out to Lewis and he didn't, and then this race he was supposed to lose a whole chunk and he didn't. So you're right. Christian came up and said it's like a victory, and they are mighty relieved, I think.
But some you win, some you lose, don't you? And I mean, let's think back to Baku. He was going to win that race, wasn't he? That was points taken away from him.
Yeah, it was point, but it was also Lewis's, or Mercedes' screw up that didn't capitalise on that mistake as well. That's what I'm saying. If you look back over the season, it's like, what does it point towards? It points towards the luck being more with Max, I think, than it is with Lewis. These things can change, of course, but I think that we shall see. I mean, I'm sure that people will say, what about Silverstone? That was lucky for Lewis because he carried on. But, it's so finely balanced.
This is another interesting twist, though. I mean, were it not for Silverstone, Max wouldn't have taken the engine penalty. He's ultimately finished second in Sochi with that penalty, but he's now bolstered by a new power unit and the extra boost that brings. So it's just such a fascinating rollout. You don't like the word fascinating, do you, Damon? Do you know this, Tom? He doesn't like it, though. He doesn't like it. He says I use it too much.
I think it's a great word. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating word. But
this is a fascinating discussion.
We've got to find another word. But anyway, amazing is another good one. But we've had this amazing, fascinating battle. And what about Mercedes' power unit? Because that looks fragile. I mean, how many of those came out and were changed recently? And also, will Lewis need one?
Well, let's work it out. So Vettel, Ricciardo, Latifi, Bottas twice.
Guys, that is exactly what I was going to say next. You read my mind, because what does that say about Mercedes' reliability? Thing. Neither of these guys can afford a DNF in these next 7 races, because we're now too close to the business end. You may never get that back. So yeah, and this is Bottas's new Monza power unit that was playing up in Russia. That's the one. So I appreciate everyone is now pushing very, very hard because they've got to homologate the engines prior to next year. So you're pushing every area of it before you nail down exactly what you're going to do. But they've got to be really, really careful that they don't compromise Lewis's championship with that.
Why do they call it a tactical decision? I mean, that was a kind of a little bit of naughtiness, wasn't it? I mean, because obviously immediately people assumed that he was going to drop back, but actually he took a minimum amount of grid places, didn't he? Because he didn't go all the way to the back of the grid. He only ended up was it 16th on the grid?
Yeah. I mean, it was tactical. Tactical because they wanted to hold Max Verstappen up. It was of the first reaction, wasn't it? But I think it was also tactical from we need to work out where we're going with the power unit going forward, and perhaps something that they'd introduced on Bottas's engine in Monza wasn't performing as they'd hoped and they needed to change it.
You could never accuse Valtteri of holding up Max Verstappen. I mean, it was almost like he got out of his way when he went past, but I'm sure Mercedes would have preferred a little bit more of a tussle.
And we said that after Zandvoort as well, didn't we? Although that Red Bull did look very, very good into turn 13. I mean, I'm going to say even Perez, but Perez made some really good overtakes into that corner as well. So I think the old Red Bull was very good there. And of course, that's where Max overtook Valtteri.
Should we just consider for a moment the competitiveness of this McLaren? Because they were nowhere in Zandvoort, obviously brilliant and winning on merit in Monza. They came into this weekend not really knowing where they stood. But as you pointed out already, Lando was able to hold Lewis back before the rain came. And Daniel finished in 4th, which was, a place up from where he qualified. Having not been anywhere earlier in the weekend, obviously we lost the whole of Saturday's session, but he was down in sort of 17th, 18th after that power unit change. So I'm just wondering how truly competitive this McLaren is and whether Lando will indeed get that maiden win in 2021, based on performance alone. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends on the nature of the circuits. It's got its strong points and its weaknesses, but it's getting there in every respect, gradually getting there as well in terms of tyre management as well. I mean, on pace at Sochi, it was fantastic. I mean, it was able to hold its own. I think it's definitely right up there, nipping on the heels basically of the Red Bull and the Mercedes, but not quite as good as them.
Out and out better than Ferrari, because it seems, look at Sainz up there in P3.
Yes, I do think out and out better than Ferrari. Lewis was actually asked about the pace of the McLaren after the race. It was because he spent so long on Ricciardo's gearbox, and he said two things. He said, one, it's very slippery in a straight line, very, very fast, good top speed, but he also said the traction is really good as well. So that's probably why it was good at Monza as well, wasn't it? Coming out of the chicanes.
Yeah, they've got something, haven't they? Because they get off the lines brilliantly as well. They get off the line at the start. So
they get off the lines brilliantly. And I can't remember which turn it is at Sochi, but there's an off-camber slow corner. And it getting the power down there, it was very good. So anywhere that's got long straights and slow corners that require good traction will be good for McLaren. So what's it going to be, guys? I'd go... Mexico might be quite good, or not?
Yeah, Mexico's one.
Be interested going to Qatar and Jeddah, not knowing anything about those circuits, not having any historical data to go on. Just be so interesting, won't it?
Oh, and then the new Abu Dhabi as well. They've changed that quite a lot.
Abu Dhabi is quite similar to Sochi, actually. But then, we did have a wet quali, so we kind of got to be a little bit careful. We don't just take Sochi as a model. But, if you go to Brazil, it's tight corners, and you really need to get the power down out of those tighter, slower corners and accelerate up the hill. So that's going to be possibly one of the other circuits.
I think we're talking ourselves into this. We think they can. Lando, you can do it.
I'm sure Lando is as well. Bless him. He's sort of giving himself public pep talks at the moment, posting things on social media like, head held high, my time will come. You could just imagine he's just regurgitating everything that we and everyone else has said to him. This is going to be a week of growth for him, I'm sure, just to learn how to leverage all that frustration, use it to his advantage.
Now, I was saved by the weather in Sochi because anyone who heard or watched the race will know that the weather wasn't great. Lots of rain, which meant I didn't have to take a dip in the Black Sea, which is something I normally do. Now, had I done that, I'm lucky because I have received very recently Manscaped's Performance Package 4.0. So I am ready to go when I've got my swimmers on. Let me tell you about this Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. It features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. And it's waterproof, so you can use it in the shower. And also, don't neglect your ear and nose hair. Keep that in check with Manscaped's Weed Whacker. It's a powerful little tool armed with a 9,000 RPM motor-powered 360-degree rotary dual-blade system. And it doesn't end there, because if you buy this Performance Package 4.0, you'll also get Manscaped's signature, now wait for this, Crop Preserver Bull Deodorant and Crop Reviver Bull Toner, a soothing aloe vera and witch hazel blend to keep you cool after a shave. They even throw in a pair of performance boxer briefs and a travel bag to keep all your kit safe. So, get 20% off and free shipping with the code F1Nation at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code F1Nation at manscaped.com. Right, I want to put something to you two. Fernando Alonso. He said after the race it was one of his best races to 6th place. Did you see him going to the grid? He went straight through the runoff area at turn 2. On his way to the grid. He was just checking the lay of the land, right? He then,
yeah,
first lap of the race, remember they were sort of 4 wide going into that corner.
Oh,
Fernando
yes.
he sort of breaks, doesn't he? But he just disappears straight through. Lets, I think, 2 cars through, Stroll and maybe was it Ricciardo? But he definitely gained because he wasn't braking as hard as everybody else into turn 2. So as a result, he was sort of further ahead going into the runoff area than he otherwise would have been. So he definitely gained, and it seemed to be a bit of a grey area. And you just think Fernando thinks of everything. He's such a wily old sod, isn't he? In fact, he said earlier in the year, I think it was in Spain, he said that he got really frustrated that there were people running through the runoff at turn 1 in Spain and they were gaining an advantage. So he applies that learning in Sochi. I mean, do we think that's fair? Fair's fair?
Oh, what did they do about it? I mean, he got away with it. He tried it on. He dropped a few places. He gave a few places back. But I remember Johnny saying to me when he saw him do it in the race, he said he practiced that on the way to the grid, which is what you just said. So he's definitely thinking about it. You'd think that they would have said you can't do it deliberately, but if the rules are unclear,
exploit them.
He's taking advantage. I mean, first corner in the middle of the grid is where you lose your front wing, isn't it? You get a puncture or you get a front wing or something like that. What's the point of doing all that? I'll just go straight across here.
Do you know what, though? I love his ambition and hunger at this stage of his career. I'd love to see how he'd fare in a Red Bull or a Mercedes, because I think he's driving brilliantly at the moment. And when you consider that his teammate was down in 14th, I mean, Ocon obviously got that sort of shock win in Hungary, but it's difficult to know how good Fernando really is right now in an Alpine. I want to see him in one of the top cars to see how he'd get on.
He hasn't lost it, has he? That's, I think in terms of his acumen, it's still all there. His understanding of the sport, it's still all there. He knows how to find advantages and deliver for the team. There's no sense that he's, soft pedaling or nearing the end of his career or anything like that. He's hungry and he's a potent force. Always has been. I'm a big fan of his.
And prior to the rain madness at the end, he was in a podium position, and I really want him to finish on the podium. He is now the highest placed guy in the championship without a podium this year. And I just following on from what we're saying, I think his performances deserve a podium. When you look at the people who have scored podiums, he deserves to be up there. So a bit like, where's Lando going to get his win? I'm also thinking, where is Fernando going to get his podium?
It would be such a popular podium, wouldn't it? And you're right, he deserves it. He's sort of managing his own expectations, saying it's not going to come with the performance of this car alone. But as we've seen time and time again in 2021, you just can't make predictions. And, I, for one, am with you. I'd love to see it happen. Oh, I've been waiting a couple of weeks for this. I'm excited. It's Ask Damon time.
Come on, ask me.
Hi Damon, Ashley here, and Aussie living in New York City. Absolutely love the show and super excited that F1 is finally hitting the States. My question is about next year, with the new cars being introduced for the 2022 season, and how you think it will affect the drivers' performance. Given they are the creme de la creme of racing drivers, are we really expecting a big shift in how they all stack up? I mean, what do you think we can expect to see next year? Who will adapt and who will struggle? Thanks so much, and hope to see you guys in Austin. Bye.
Hi, Ashley in New York. Yeah, great that you're an F1 fan and you're going to go to Austin by the sounds of it. I'm sadly not going to be there, but I'm going to miss that one, which is going to be a shame. But what is going to happen next year with the new rules and everything? What can we expect? The intention is that cars will be able to follow more closely without being affected by a loss of grip because of the aerodynamics. So the cars have been designed so that they can follow each other more closely. And clever people at F1 and engineers who work for F1 have been working in conjunction with the teams to produce that effect. Within that, they don't have a they don't have a formatted set of design regulations. So there's scope within the regulations for teams to be inventive. And what can happen traditionally is that the teams who have more resources come up with something really ingenious, and the cars, when they hit the track, one team has got a big advantage over everyone else. Now, we're hoping that doesn't happen, because as we've seen with this current regulation, we're coming to the end of it, and the grid is tightened up because there's less and less room for the guys at the front with the resources to make more gains. So the people are catching them up. So we're hoping that doesn't happen for next year. What we really are hoping is that when you see cars on track, they can go wheel to wheel and get right up behind the car in front in a corner a bit better than they can currently. When it comes down to wheel action, the hot young drivers are as threatening and as capable as the older guys. In fact, sometimes more. It may be with cars closer on the track, then it favours, and if they're more robust, it could be that the more higher risk-taking drivers may be advantaged by the new formula.
Or, Damon, the way Lewis drove at the weekend and let the race come to him could favour him. Difficult to predict, Ashley, difficult to predict.
Difficult. I don't expect that bit of it to change much. I just think we should have less races where we get a procession of cars that can't get close to each other. That's hopefully what it's eradicating.
Yeah, I think what's crucial about this is that each team does go in with a blend of youth and experience, because each offers something different. And I think it's a mistake to assume that you can kind of wade into new regulations without someone that has clocked up loads of Grand Prix to adapt. I mean, the only thing that I think is ironic about all of this, and we touched on it before in this pod, is that it's to increase entertainment. And yet we've had the best season I can remember in 2021. We almost don't need these regulations, but they're coming. So let's embrace them.
So Ashley, I hope that answers your question. We got any more questions there?
Hello, Damon. My name is Mike, and I live in Ohio, in the Midwest of the U.S. My questions for you today pertain to the drivers and their interactions with the press. We typically see clips of driver interviews gone well. How often are drivers these days walking away from a correspondent because of the question they're being asked? Have you witnessed this recently? And finally, do you have a personal story to tell us of a time you were being drilled and told them to pound salt?
Mike in Ohio, that's, oh my God, I've had some experiences, I can tell you. There's been one or two, haven't there, Tom? Was that the one about Juan Pablo Montoya and the cheeky Aussie interviewer? Can we remember that one?
I can. JPM didn't enjoy that one.
One for one, just one hypothetical one is Juan, the wonder kid, the rising number one of Formula One wonders, should Juan only win one Formula One year? Would Juan want to have won that one in round one?
But one of them would be in round one.
I'm not trying at all to spin a yarn, Juan, but just wish you the best. If we can all just stay calm. Juan, just on your car, we wouldn't wish any harm on you or the car, but is that the way you approach your Formula One racing?
No, it's no comment. Leave it there.
It's just a bit annoying, knowing, isn't it?
That was just too much of a piss take, wasn't it? It was, I can understand why Juan Pablo walked off really.
It's got to be funny.
He was a local radio DJ, that guy, and he was just having a laugh.
Was it funny?
Do you know what? In that kind of environment, it was quite funny, because they're quite formal, those press conferences, aren't they? So when you go and get that, but JPM, I think, had just got off a long haul flight and wasn't up for it, really, was he?
As a racing driver, you kind of want to be taken seriously, but at the same time, you kind of, I guess, also recognise when some people are having a laugh and want to make a joke. I got Dennis Pennis. Do you remember there was a guy called Dennis Pennis? Yeah, he came up to me once and made some comments about, and I just thought, fortunately I knew who he was, so I kind of was forewarned, and I thought the way to deal with this is just laugh along with him and not get too shirty, because he was going to say something which would rile me.
Mike in Ohio, YouTube that, Dennis Pennis, Damon Hill, I'm sure it's there.
A slightly different take on the theme. I was in Hungary and I'd just given birth to Wilf. Well, it was like my maybe second or third race back after giving birth. And a driver who will remain nameless came into the pen, and he walked into the pen and he came out of sequence, and I was in a bit of a fluster, probably still had baby brain. How you have a bit of fuzz. It hasn't shifted 6 years later. And he came over to me and I was trying to find my notes on him, and he said, "You're not ready for me." I said, "Oh, no, I am. I'm terribly sorry." And he turned on his heel and he walked away. And I was so annoyed. Anyway, when he did eventually come back, I said, and I had tears rolling down my face, I was so emotional and hormonal. I said, listen, I've got a newborn son at home. I would much rather be there with him than standing here talking to you, but I have to. And this is my job. And I'd appreciate some respect. And he said, I'm so sorry. And he gave me a hug.
Right, Pinks,
Oh,
we need to know who that was. You're not going to spill the beans, are you?
I can't say. Although, he was a legend at the end of it. But in that moment, he made me cry.
My dad was famously, could be quite curt with interviewers. And there was one where a guy came up to him on the grid and said, Graham, I think he had the whole film crew with him and stuff. Graham, is there anything that really annoys you about being interviewed on the grid? He said, when idiots like you come up and ask me stupid questions like that. And he got what he wanted, didn't he, really? And there's a time and a place for those sort of questions. Probably not just before the start of a race.
Thank you so much for your questions. Keep them coming in because the champ just loves them. Ask damonhill@gmail.com. Send us a voice note and we will play it out on the pod. Okay, any other business? I wanted to actually, Damon, get your take on the Schumacher documentary, which I know you proudly contributed to. And Tom, there was a lovely moment in the paddock yesterday where Mick Schumacher had gone out of the race. I don't even know if you noticed that I noticed this. You noticed that I noticed this, Damon, but he walked past you and he was pretty downbeat because, he didn't see the checkered flag, but he saw you and his face lit up and he gave you a big beaming smile. And I thought, it was just a lovely little moment. And I thought he must have been immensely proud that you spoke so beautifully on that documentary that was such a lovely tribute to his father.
Thanks for describing it that way, Natalie. I don't know if any of the listeners, or they should, if they haven't, listened to Tom's interview with Mick. Mick comes across on that interview as the most articulate and sensitive, intelligent, lovely young man. And I'm sure that his mum and his dad are extremely proud of the way he's turned out because he's been through a tough time. And I can relate to that. Lost my dad when I was 15 and he's had to endure this awful experience. And the documentary film touches on all of that. And it touches on the human side of a guy who was very easily identified, at least from these shores anyway, as the villain because of his dastardly doings on the track. And but of course he was there's no question he was a fearsome competitor, but he was also a lovely man at home and a family man, and that's what the film shows. And I think it's really I saw it as a kind of love letter from Karina to Michael, and we wish them all the best.
Damon, did you ever see that soft side to him after you retired? Did he sort of open up to you?
I'll tell you what happened. There was when I retired, I was someone had the bright idea. It may have been you, Tom. I don't know. Someone from F1 Racing magazine decided, wouldn't it be funny if I interviewed, or he interviewed me, or I interviewed Michael? So he came to the porter cabins in Japan and everything, and he was really friendly and really kind of nice. And it was like the gloves were off, and it was all just a normal kind of meeting between some other guy I'd known only in the context of combat, and he seemed quite charming. It's sad, isn't it? It would have been nice to have met up with your old combatants, people who you raced against, and got to know them a bit better, but not to be, unfortunately, with Michael. So, as we said,
I love the way you put it, though. A love letter from Karina. That sums it up so well. On the topic of Schumacher, one thing we haven't mentioned on the pod, because it's happened while we were in Russia, Mick and Nikita Mazepin have been confirmed for next year. So both of them getting a second season at Haas.
Nikita's invited Mick to Moscow, hasn't he? He was trying to patch things up because there was rumours of them not getting on too well. I'm not sure that Mick wanted to take an invitation to Moscow.
I think it's pretty impossible not to get on with Mick Schumacher, though, isn't it?
Sure.
Based on everything that we've just said. But I mean, it's tough. Look, I understand it's tough with two rookies, but I think it's always great when rookies are offered a second year. It just seems a bit ruthless and harsh to just give them 1 year and let them build on it. They've both spoken of the trajectory of their learning, just how steep that learning curve has been, even in the slowest car on the grid. They have had to take on so much. And it's just the beginning of their journey. So it's good they've got the chance to bed in.
Sounds like the Haas is going to be quite a competitive car. They're getting quite a lot of help from Ferrari, aren't they, for next year?
Well, Simone Resta is their technical director, and he's good. He's got a great record with Ferrari. So, yeah, let's hope. And all of their budget, all of their development budget from this year has been ploughed into next year. And hopefully the intensity of the drivers' rivalry won't be less, but hopefully they'll have other cars to race next year, which will give them something else to talk about in the debriefs other than he said, she said, Mick did this, Nikita did that, which seems to be the case this year. So let's see them progress. But look, on the topic of any other business, we saw in Russia as well that Miami has confirmed its date for next year. The first confirmation of a Grand Prix date for next year, 8th of May, 2022.
Welcome to Miami. Bienvenido a Miami. I cannot wait. Vamos.
Natasha.
That is cool, though. I cannot wait for that one.
Yeah.
Sign me up, baby.
Gosh, there's so much to talk about in that Russian Grand Prix. I mean, I don't think I could take much more of this. How many more to go?
I think whilst you've got hugely competitive cars and hugely competitive drivers up and down the grid, you're going to get drama. Throw in a bit of rain as well. Bring it on.
So that's it, F1 Nation. Yeah, that's our Russia podcast. Over and out. What do you say in Russian? Natalie's got all the Russian. Come on.
Nostrovia. Oh, я тебя люблю.
What does that mean?
That means I love you, no?
Well, okay.
I love you. I love you, Tom Clarkson. I love you, Damon Hill. I love you, Formula One. F1 Nation is a podcast from Formula One in association with Audio Boom. Goodbye.